إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. قال الله عز وجل في القرآن المجيد يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. صدق الله العظيم. أما بعد. We begin by praising Allah. We praise Him, we seek His help, and we ask for His forgiveness. And as Muslims, we declare that nobody deserves to be worshipped in any way, shape, or form besides the one and only true God, Allah. And we declare that Muhammad was the last and final messenger that was sent for our guidance and for the guidance of all humanity until the end of time. Respected brothers, sisters, and guests, in 2012, which was just 6 years ago, there was a survey conducted across the United States of America to see how many churches there are in the USA. And they counted 384,000 churches. Now that's a large number, but oftentimes when you quote a number in a statistic, it doesn't really resonate with people because they have nothing to compare that with. So let me compare it with something so that you can get a better understanding. In 2012, there were 13,000 Starbucks coffees across the country. Now if you travel around the country, you go to different cities, oftentimes what people tell me, and I myself notice, is that you're driving and you see a Starbucks coffee. You drive another block or two, you see another Starbucks coffee. And you start thinking, there's a lot of Starbucks in this country. And we got a Starbucks right down the street from here. Very nice manager, alhamdulillah. So, if you want to understand how many churches there are in America, think about how many Starbucks there are. 13,000 Starbucks in 2012 only in this country, and 384,000 churches in this country. That means that there's 30 times more churches than Starbucks across the country. So there's a lot of churches. And in the same year that they counted the number of churches, Dr. Ihsan Bugbi also counted the number of mosques across the country in a completely different study. And the number that he counted was 2,106 mosques across the United States. Now, this is interesting because he also did a previous counting of the number of mosques in the year 2000. So 12 years prior to that, and he counted that there were 1,200 mosques in America. So that means that the number of masjids almost doubled. And alhamdulillah, I mean, that's a great thing. As a Muslim, we look at that and we say, that's awesome, that's great. But we have to come back down to a few more variables. We have to look a little bit deeper. The same study that counted the number of churches in 2012, they said that from the year 2006 to 2012, 30,000 churches shut down in America. That's almost 10% of them were closed. And I know you probably realize that many of the mosques are actually churches. We buy them because there's permitting reasons and licensing reasons. But what we have to understand is we have to understand that we will be happy. We look at that statistic and we say, awesome, the number of masjids are increasing. The number of Muslims is increasing, and that's something to be very happy about in this country. But at the same time, the number of people who actually attend a masjid is not as many as we think it will be. So there are two different statistics that I've come across. One of them looks at the people who vaguely are identified as Muslim, yet they really have absolutely no Islam in their lives whatsoever. If you count every single person who's a Muslim in the country, we're looking at 10% regular or frequent mosque attendance out of all the other people. That means 90% of people, they do not attend a masjid throughout the week. Now that's one statistic, and that's probably referring to how many people make it more than Jummah, at least one time more than Jummah prayer. So 1 hour, maybe 2 hours usage of a facility. But alhamdulillah, I'm very happy that I was attending the ISNA conference just a few weeks ago. And I was listening to a lecture by Dalia Mugahid, who's a great resource in our community. So she does statistics, she does evaluations, she reads a lot on in this subject. And she says something very interesting. She says 45% of Muslims said in one of the studies that she found that they attend a masjid at least once on a weekly basis. 45%. And that's considered a good number relative to other religions out there. And then she said something very interesting. She said the idea that mosques don't matter anymore is wrong. And that's very powerful, because there's a growing trend of people who are starting to think that the idea of a masjid, the fact that we just go simply to a masjid to pray at least once a week, or if not, have some other services in the masjid, that's something that's outdated. It's something that somehow is going to be replaced by the internet or by virtual mosque or by some other way. She said this is incorrect. Most people will identify with the mosque, which means that the masjid matters. And because it matters for people, and because the idea of it being outdated is not prevalent, we need to seriously think about what type of resources we invest into the masjid. And we need to think about, conceptually, what kind of masjid do we want to have? We spend so much time talking about what type of masjids we have. We need to put some time into thinking about what type of masjids we want to have, so that we can actually start planning and building and taking some steps towards that. So if you look at that, I told you that the number of churches that shut down were 30,000. But there was one category of churches that increased. And those were specifically known as non-denominational churches or evangelical churches. They're a new type of church. And they grew by 54,000 from 1998. And they grew up to 84,000 in 2012. So this is the only one type of denomination among Christians that's rising, it's increasing. And the reason why it's increasing is because for them, the idea of a church is not just a place to come and worship and it's done. They make sure that their churches are built for a specific purpose, and that is, in addition to worship, they become a community center that's offering specific services, that's offering people something additional to simply worship, and that's why they're increasing. So it's very important for us to reflect upon that and think about what it means to be 1% of the American population. And what do we want to see in our masjids, and why do we have certain challenges? So let's reflect very quickly. Why do we have challenges in our mosques? Challenges are natural. But think about, what is the function of an Islamic institution like a masjid? What are they marketing? You see, everyone is marketing something. What is a masjid marketing? Well, Islam means surrender to God. So when they're trying to present something to people, they're encouraging people to submit and surrender themselves to Allah. That is not an easy thing to market. The opposite of that is surrendering to your desires, to do whatever you feel like. Just enjoy and just have fun and do whatever feels good. But that's not what Islam is marketing. I mean, there's a room for that in Islam. You can have some fun and you can, enjoy yourself a little bit. But Islam is about suppressing your desires, keeping yourself in control, and surrendering yourself to Allah. And that is not an easy concept when you have to choose between these two. Do what you feel like, or do the right thing, or what God would be happy with. It's not an easy thing to market. And everyone markets something. And there's always messaging that takes place. So Islamic institutions are marketing self-control. You have to resist. You have to control yourself. And if you look at that, different institutions, they market the exact opposite of self-control. In 1994, one of the most successful marketing campaigns of the 90s was the brand of soda Sprite. And Sprite came out with the marketing strategy The slogan was, obey your thirst. Right? Obey your thirst. Basically, your thirst, you're feeling thirsty, just this is what you should be drinking. Now, what is Islam? You try and market the exact opposite. Try to market, أَطِيعُ اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُ الرَّسُولَ. Obey Allah and obey His Messenger, which is a verse in the Quran that comes up again and again. The Quran tells us again and again, obey Allah and obey His Messenger. The difference between trying to convince people to do this versus convince them to do that, one is much more difficult than the other. Because in Islam, we have to control ourselves. Where in Ramadan, you're feeling thirsty, you're not supposed to obey your thirst. The message is, don't obey your thirst. When you feel like drinking some alcohol, people are drinking around you, you're at a company party, everyone invites you, and you say, I'm the only person not drinking. The desires come and say, you know what, just drink something. When you feel like, you know what, everyone else around me in my school, they're all smoking weed or they're all vaping, right? And I just want to go ahead and do that too. You have to resist. And Islam teaches you should resist that. So we're marketing self-control to people, human beings, who are not naturally inclined towards wanting self-control. And the second thing that an Islamic institution like a mosque is marketing is prioritization. What do you prioritize in your life? Islam is telling you to prioritize the akhirah over the dunya. Prioritize the next life over this life, this dunya in which we live. And that's not an easy thing to do, right? Because in 2003, McDonald's came out with the slogan, I'm loving it. You're doing what tastes good. Doesn't matter if the food is good for you or is healthy for you or whatever it is. If you're loving it, you're enjoying it, that's what you should do. De Beers was a diamond company, and in 1948, they came up with the slogan that they have not changed yet. In 1948, they came up with the slogan that says, a diamond is forever. And I think many people know that slogan. Especially most of the sisters know that slogan very well. And if the husbands have not, done, what's needed, they probably have heard that slogan as well. Why did they do that though? There's research into why they came up with this slogan. This is not just something that just comes out of thin air. They did it because they knew that if they can inflate the diamond market to make sure that diamonds have a higher value than they're really worth, then they can make sure that that value remains and people don't cash in their diamonds. There's research on this. So what happens is, many people know, if you buy a brand new car, the moment you buy it, as soon as you drive it off the lot, it's lost like 10% or whatever the statistic is. But when it comes to diamonds, the moment you buy it, as soon as you walk out of there, you've lost somewhere between 30 to 50% of the value of that diamond. But you have the slogan in your mind that diamonds are forever. They last forever because they're hard. But the idea is, don't trade it in, don't sell it in, you keep it there, and therefore that's going to maintain the market value of the entire diamond industry. And this has been one of the slogans that very few companies have not changed their marketing strategy because it's been so successful. Now if you look at that, there's a challenge of a mosque. An Islamic institution like a masjid is naturally challenged because they're trying to market something which does not automatically appeal to people's desires. They're trying to market the exact opposite. To take life seriously, to take Islam seriously, to worship Allah in a serious manner. So that's a challenge that we face, and what we need to understand is that if we're trying to build the ideal Islamic center that we would like to see, there's a few things that this institution should have as its primary or core functions. The first core function that it must have is that it should educate people about the religion of Islam. Because there's no DIY Islam. There's no like do-it-yourself. You go to Home Depot, there's a DIY section, you can get a tutorial, you could fix things in your home, just do it yourself. But this idea of do-it-yourself, Islam doesn't work, because when you're reading the Quran on your own, if you don't understand something, you can't ask the question to the Quran, it's going to give you an answer back. It's like if you're reading a verse, and you're like, I wonder what that verse means, I don't understand it. Say, hey, Quran, can you give me the answer to this? It's not going to answer you. You cannot go and make dua and say, oh Allah, give me the answer, and somehow the answer is going to come to you immediately. It doesn't work that way. And the same thing is that even today, many people, they get a lot of benefit out of listening to scholars and other people giving YouTube lectures. You get a lecture, it's recorded on YouTube, you listen to it, or you watch it, or you're driving, you listen to a podcast, and you're benefiting. The problem is that you cannot ask questions to that person in that video or the person in that audio recording. So if there's a misconception or if you have a question, you cannot get that answered. And that should be one of the core functions of an Islamic institution that's able to actually give people an authentic and correct presentation of what Islam actually represents. So there's access to scholars and scholarship. There's access to authentic materials and books so that you don't have to go to a random bookstore or a library and just try and figure out, hey, which book am I supposed to choose about Islam? So what a lot of people do, unfortunately. You go to a library, you ask a librarian, what's a good book about Islam? 99 out of 100 times, they're not going to necessarily recommend a good book for you. Because writing books about Islam is like a new industry. People make a lot of money out of it. They're not necessarily authentic books about what Islam teaches. So there is this challenge about educating people, but also educating them in an effective manner. And that's where we have another challenge. The effective manner is that what we have in reality, if we look at our society here in Southern California, most mosques do not have a fully qualified person to even give the Friday sermon. Now I'm saying this very clearly, openly, right? And qualifications are relative, but most people who started giving khutbahs, myself included, when we first started giving, and it's debatable whether we're still qualified, but the qualifications were almost nothing. If you could speak and you read a few books about Islam privately on your own, you were invited to go give khutbahs inside of mosques. And that's the standard. And there's such a demand for people to give a lecture, even though they're not qualified. And if they're qualified, sometimes they're not necessarily effective because they don't know how to deliver the message in a good manner, or they don't have any public speaking skills. They've never taken a public speaking class. So this becomes another challenge that we're facing. And we live in an entertain me culture. The culture in which we live in is there's massive entertainment taking place. So if someone is giving a lecture, you have to compete to entertain an audience with some other entertainer who's dancing around, or people are so used to being overly stimulated in the Hollywood films that they're watching with 3D scenes and surround sound and action going everywhere, and then you come to the khutbah and the khatib moves around like this and everything looks slow. It's not as cool as the action movie that you watch. And that becomes a challenge because people's focus is not there. And people have a tendency to not be able to focus for more than a few minutes without getting distracted. So these are all challenges, but educating people, teaching them about Islam in an effective manner is one of the primary functions of an Islamic institution that we need to build. The second function that should be there in an Islamic community is that it should be a source of community, of uniting Muslims around the entire area, bringing them together and letting them meet and interact with one another face to face so they can actually establish a relationship. That's one of the purposes of why we have a Friday prayer. The Friday prayer is not just to come and listen to a sermon. It could have been done at different times, but it's to also bring the community together. Unfortunately, because we live in a country where Friday is not a holiday, people need to rush right back to work. They come straight, they got to go right back to work. We don't have the time to be able to socialize on a Friday like they normally could. Therefore, we need to create alternative opportunities for that, and that is partly the function of an ideal Islamic center. And then the thing we have to understand, there's many other aspects, but when it comes down to all of this, we have to realize that if we see the amount of services or the amount of activities that could potentially be coming out of an Islamic institution, we have to realize that we need to start focusing on not just building buildings, not just thinking about the architecture of the place, not just thinking about how nice the carpet should look, but we need to make sure that we have a vision as a community and as individuals, that we have a vision that we would like to see our masjids be something much more than they currently are, to be in a capacity where they can actually attract people, where they can educate people, where they can form people to become better Muslims, to market the message, I hate to use the term marketing, but market the message of Islam to these people so that the Muslim ummah can be stronger, the Muslim community can be stronger. And there's much more we can say about that, but all of these things, we could have a long lecture on this, all of these things, it comes back down to this, is that if we go back to the statistics, I want to leave you with this message. The number of masjids almost doubled between 2000 and 2012. But this is not a real measure of success for the Muslim community. The real measure of success will be when we find that the number of people who are regularly frequenting a masjid, benefiting from the masjid, and benefiting, meaning serving the masjid, actually doubles in the next decade, not counting all the additional immigration and the attrition that has happened. When we find that, that will be a true measure of success. And it's only going to happen if we accomplish two things, if we understand two things. Number one is that we should have a golden standard for our large Islamic centers, that they offer diverse services and professional services, and we're willing to invest in that. And number two, that parents encourage their children and friends and family members and everybody else, encourages everyone to actually frequent their masjid. And if it's a small masjid right next to their home, that masjid can actually be the gateway masjid to a larger center eventually. Because you don't have to have all giant mosques. You can have small mosques, what I call gateway mosques. You just go there and you pray. Like there are gateway drugs. They say marijuana is a gateway drug to LSD and other things, right? You can debate that. There are gateway drugs, there are gateway masjids. If people's hearts are connected to the idea that there should be a masjid and that there should be a Muslim community, and that we don't simply just spend all of our time in front of a computer screen or in front of our phones as individuals, but we care about the idea of community, we will find that automatically, the ummah, the entire Muslim community will improve naturally. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us and guide us at all times. Astaghfirullah li wa lakum wa li sa'iril muslimin fastaghfiruhu innahu huwal ghafurur rahim. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ba'd. So to just recap what we talked about the importance of building or thinking about how to form Islamic institutions which will truly serve the community and help them to become better Muslims despite the challenges that we have. And inshallah we can do that. So let us make dua. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us and guide us at all times. O Allah, help those people who are going through difficulties and doubts. O Allah, take away their doubts. O Allah, let them overcome their challenges. O Allah, do not test them with more than they can handle. O Allah, help those people who are sick. O Allah, grant them full recovery and forgive them for their sins. O Allah, help us to live as true Muslims and help us to see the truth as truth and follow it, and help us to see the false as false and keep us away from it. Ameen. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. We have just a few announcements here. Just bear with me a moment. So first of all, tonight we have a brand new FFN program at 8 p.m. Dr. Imad Ba'youn will be starting a class on the purification of the heart. A very, very important topic that we all need. So you can check that out if you can make it. We have an Ashura iftar dinner at IIOC. So Ashura is the 10th of Muharram. It is on Thursday. It's a special day. It's highly encouraged to be fasting on this day, and you can add a day before, a day after. So we're going to have an iftar, a fast breaking here at IIOC. Please register for that. I think there's some registration in the lobby. We have a new program for children, and that is a children's book reading at IAOC starting from 7 p.m. on Fridays. So you can check that out for your kids. And also just a quick note about our outreach department or our dawah department. Alhamdulillah, we're one of the few mosques or Islamic centers in the country that actually has an outreach program. It's a dawah program. And it's really unique because there's full-time support for this program. So it's important for you to know kind of what happens. Some of you come in, you pray, and then you walk away and you're like, I wonder what goes on in this mosque. You see a chandelier and a dome, and how is all of this used? Well, it's being used by the Dawah department by actually countering the Islamophobia narrative and by teaching people about Islam. So we actually conduct tours of this mosque on a weekly basis for people who are coming. We go out to schools, we go out to universities, we go to churches and synagogues, we give presentations about Islam from our IIOC outreach department right here. Because of our new Muslim services, almost 60 people have already accepted Islam just in 2018 in the mosque here. So we have tours, we have presentations, we have all of these things. And what we need from you is four things, just real quick. Number one, we need volunteers who can actually help give tours of the masjid, who can give presentations, who can become mentors for new Muslims, and training is provided for all of these things. So we need volunteers. Number two, if you know anyone who's interested in becoming Muslim or something like that, don't always try just to handle it yourself. You can outsource part of that to us because we have trained people working here. Bring them in. If they have questions about Islam, bring them in, go to the office and say, I want to reach out to the outreach department. We have people trained for that. Number three, we need your du'as that we can be successful. And number four, we need your financial support. So you can check out, there's a table outside in the lobby. However way you can help, check out the table, inshallah. Wa qim as-salah.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammad.